Have you heard of dissociation? Has your mom heard of it? Has your teacher, boss, best friend, coach, or roommate heard of it? 1/3 of people experience dissociation at some time in their life, yet a majority of people don't know what dissociation is. So let me tell you. Dissociation is a psychological defense mechanism against negative feelings, conflicts, or experiences. It can be a symptom of mental illnesses like PTSD, anxiety, and depression, as well as separate dissociative disorders. It is often triggered by trauma or intensely painful feelings, which can be emotional or physical, and it's our brain's way of protecting us from fully experiencing such feelings.
I have a mental health condition called derealization, which is basically chronic dissociation. This is when your brain disconnects from reality as a way to cope. I've recently found evidence that this has just always been the way my brain has dealt with high amounts of stress. I went through a very stressful time around 2012, 2013. There were lots of different things that happened.
This mainly came about when I was in a very high stress situation.
You know, people who have suffered some kind of trauma, usually earlier in life, in childhood or whatever, that triggers them and they might dissociate because of that.
I guess at this stressful time, my brain just decided it wanted to live in this disconnected version of life always.
That's bound to happen as they go through different relationships or circumstances in their lives.
You may be wondering, have I ever dissociated? You're not alone in wondering this. Almost every person I spoke to about dissociation in the making of this project realized that they were dissociative and had never known there was a name for it or that other people experienced it too. Many people describe dissociating as feeling like you're floating out of your body and looking down at yourself. You may look down at your hands and not recognize them as your own.
When I begin to dissociate, I might not even notice key signals because I'm just kind of drifting off.
I look around and I know I'm in a place, but it feels like looking at a postcard. You know, just like experiencing stuff, but not feeling like I'm there.
I had this uncomfortable sense of floating, not taking in as much as I used to, not being able to see properly, my memory being really bad, just like I was dreaming.
It's almost like this vortex, like a tunnel I just go through in my head where I'm not able to communicate, or at least it feels that way, to communicate what I'm thinking or feeling, and in fact my thoughts just kind of shut down.
If you've reached this point in the video, you're beginning to crack the surface of the frozen pool of knowledge about dissociation. You are aware. However, not everyone is.
I remember telling my boyfriend about this at the time and he was like, oh, it'll go away eventually. And it never did.
Unawareness can result in a lack of compassion or empathy toward a person who's struggling. People who encounter someone who is dissociative but are unaware of what dissociation is can make unfair judgments.
I was dating somebody and it was still a pretty new relationship, and they came to the date acting different than they had in the past, and it really threw me off because they were so different and I didn't know what to expect, and that sort of triggered this dissociation where I just got really quiet and I couldn't say anything, and they got madder and madder at me, and that made it worse and worse, and they didn't know what was going on, and of course for me I just clammed up and couldn't relate to them at all. Kind of just ended abruptly at that point.
When dissociation is dismissed by others, it leads to that person feeling isolated and their feelings snowballing.
I didn't know what it was for the first 5 years, and it's caused me severe depression and depressive episodes. And at first I just thought it was that. I thought it was depression. But as I'd come out of the depressive episodes, I still knew that something was definitely wrong and something big was missing, and then ironically that would pull me back into the depression.
Leaving dissociation unrecognized, a person would not be able to get the support to cope with it and would not be able to get a potential dissociative disorder diagnosed. People with dissociative disorders have higher rates of suicidal ideation, suicide attempts, and self-injurious behavior than do people with other disorders. A somewhat unique example of uninformed judgment of someone suffering from dissociation occurred in the 1994 trial of Lorena Bobbitt. Lorena suffered an abusive husband and went through a great deal of trauma and later was diagnosed with PTSD. Lorena was being tried for cutting off her abusive husband's penis.
Then I was just fall into this numbness that I felt before. Part of me wanted to, say, just kill me here, whatever. I just gonna die. All I wanted to do was just get away from him. I don't quite remember how I got out of my bed or nothing. It was just like a zombie.
Memory loss is a common occurrence in dissociative people. Dissociative amnesia is a dissociative disorder which includes gaps in memory for long periods of time or of memories involving the traumatic event.
I remember very vividly, she said, I went to the kitchen, I opened the refrigerator light illuminated a knife. So that's pretty good recall. And then to say you have no memory of it, that didn't seem very credible that she would not remember that.
People who are unaware of how dissociation affects the brain's ability to recall a traumatic event believed Lorena was lying in court. This isolated Lorena and many other victims who sympathized with her as the whole world watched and judged her.
Lorena Bobbitt may have been abused, but did it cause her to go temporarily insane when she mutilated her husband? That will be the ultimate question when this trial resumes on Friday.
Many people are familiar with mental health disorders such as depression and anxiety, but the symptom of dissociation is lesser known. Without that familiarity, people's struggles are regularly dismissed. But for those who suffer from it, having support and understanding makes all the difference.
I found out the name last year during a mental breakdown, and it was super refreshing to find out that I wasn't just going crazy and that it had a name, and also that a lot of other people felt like this as well.
It was just like I was scrolling through the social medias and people were like talking about their experiences with dissociation, and then I just started like noticing my own experiences and behaviors more and more as that happens when you become educated.
Lack of awareness about dissociation leads to unfair, uninformed judgment of people who are dissociative. You have just been made aware. So go share your new knowledge, continue to educate yourself, and spread the news. Dissociation exists. This video is part of a larger project I'm creating for my senior year in high school, and I would greatly appreciate your feedback. Please take a few moments to fill out the survey linked in the description.